The airline secret. Eleanor Vance had dedicated years to building her career, but at 35,000 feet, she was informed, without warning, that her seat, the one she had meticulously chosen and paid for, no longer belonged to her. A stranger occupied her first-class spot, casually reading a magazine as if he had every right to be there. When she questioned the situation, the flight crew dismissed her with a rehearsed explanation of her reassignment. Eleanor, however, wasn't easily dismissed. A pulse of anger coursed through her. This wasn't a simple mistake. It felt like something deeper, a subtle power play. As whispers spread through the cabin and passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, she realized she wasn't just fighting for herself. How many others had been quietly sidelined, their voices unheard? HYPN Stories brings you this compelling narrative of one woman who refused to back down when the system tried to erase her. As the tension escalates and secrets are revealed, the truth behind the airline's hidden agenda will leave you speechless. By the time this plane lands, Eleanor's battle will ripple through the skies, and nothing will ever be the same. Stay tuned, because what happens next will change everything. Eleanor Vance was no stranger to challenges. As a marketing executive, she had fought for every inch of her success, refusing to let anyone dictate her worth. But as she boarded the evening flight, she never imagined her next battle would unfold in the cramped aisle of first class. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached her assigned seat, 2D. A first-class ticket wasn't just about comfort, it was a hard-earned reward for a demanding week of presentations and negotiations. But as she neared the row, her pace slowed. A man, impeccably dressed and appearing to be in his late 40s, was already comfortably settled in her seat, engrossed in a magazine, as if he owned the entire row. Eleanor double-checked her boarding pass. C2D, paid in full. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I believe you're in my seat." The man barely glanced up. "I don't think so," he said, his voice indifferent, carrying the tone of someone who rarely faced opposition. Eleanor had encountered men like him before. She knew his type. "I booked this seat," she stated, keeping her voice even. She extended her ticket. The man sighed, finally lowering his magazine. His gaze flicked lazily toward a passing flight attendant. "They told me to sit here." A knot formed in Eleanor's stomach. This wasn't a simple mix-up. She turned to the flight attendant, a woman with a practiced professional smile, her name tag reading Beth. "There seems to be a mistake," Eleanor said, handing over her ticket. "This is my seat." Beth's smile faltered as she scanned the boarding pass. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face before she looked back at Eleanor. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Vince." There was a reassignment. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Reassigned by whom? Beth hesitated. The system automatically adjusted the seating. That wasn't an answer, not really. "And where's my new seat?" Eleanor's grip on her boarding pass tightened. Beth cleared her throat. "In economy." A sharp silence fell between them. Eleanor inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "I paid for first class." "I understand," Beth said quickly, "but there was an error." Eleanor interjected, "An error that conveniently downgraded me while someone else sits in my seat?" The murmurs around her grew louder. Passengers glanced over, some whispering. A woman in 1A leaned in to speak to her seatmate. A man in 3C looked up from his laptop. Eleanor could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on her. "I'd like to speak to the flight manager," she said, crossing her arms. Beth hesitated before nodding. "I'll get him." As the flight attendant disappeared down the aisle, Eleanor turned back to the man in 2D. He had folded his magazine but still held it like a shield. "You didn't book this seat, did you?" she asked. He shrugged. "They told me I could sit here." Eleanor clenched her jaw. That was all she needed to hear. Moments later, a tall man in a dark suit arrived, his expression polite but guarded. His name tag read, Mark, Flight Manager. Ms. Vince, I understand there's a concern, he said smoothly. "There's more than a concern," Eleanor replied. "I booked 2D, I confirmed 2D, and now I'm being told that I was moved without my consent to economy." Mark exchanged a look with Beth before turning back to Eleanor. There was a last-minute request from a VIP. The system made the change. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "And who is this VIP?" Mark hesitated. "I can't disclose that information." Realization settled over Eleanor like a heavyweight. The man in her seat wasn't a VIP. He had simply asked for an upgrade, and the airline had handed over her spot without question. Passengers were no longer pretending not to listen. The atmosphere shifted. I met hers with a mixture of curiosity and unease. "This isn't about a system error, is it?" Eleanor's voice was calm but edged with steel. "This is about something else." Mark squared his shoulders. "Ms. Vance, if you would just take your new seat." "No." Eleanor stood firm. "Either I get my seat back, or I make a call." Beth visibly tensed. "A call to whom?" Eleanor's lips curved into a cold smile. "The airline's corporate office." The reaction was immediate. Mark stiffened. Beth's posture became rigid. Even the man in 2D shifted uncomfortably. A thick silence followed. Eleanor knew she had the upper hand. Then, a new voice cut through the tension. "What seems to be the issue here?" Eleanor turned to see the captain standing at the entrance to first class. His uniform was crisp, his presence commanding. Mark straightened. "Captain Reed, I was handling it." "I'd like to hear it from her," the captain said, his gaze locking onto Eleanor. She met his eyes without hesitation. "I booked this seat, paid for it, and now I'm being told I was moved against my will to accommodate someone else." Captain Reed frowned. "A system error, that's what they're calling it." The captain turned to Mark. "And who authorized this reassignment?" Mark hesitated, his eyes flickering briefly toward the man in 2D. The captain didn't miss it. "Sir," he said, addressing the seated man, "may I see your ticket?" The man hesitated, then slowly folded his magazine. I don't have a printed one." Captain Reed's expression hardened. "Then how did you get this seat?" "The gate agent said I could take it if there was availability." A murmur spread through the cabin. The captain turned back to Mark. "So, a last-minute request from a non-VIP overruled a confirmed, paid first-class ticket?" Mark opened his mouth, then shut it. There was no justifiable answer. Beth finally broke the silence. "Captain, this isn't the first time." Mark shot her a warning look, but Beth pressed on. "We've had similar cases before, and it's always passengers like MS. Vance." Eleanor's stomach tightened. She understood the unspoken words. Passengers who don't cause a fuss. Passengers they think won't complain. Captain Reed exhaled, his expression dark. Then he turned to Eleanor. "MS. Vance, your seat is yours. Would you like me to personally ensure you're comfortable?" Eleanor allowed herself a small, victorious smile. "I'd appreciate that." The man in 2D said nothing as he gathered his things and walked away. Eleanor lowered herself into her rightful seat, but her mind didn't settle. Because if this wasn't the first time, how many others had been quietly pushed aside? How many had simply accepted the system error and moved to the back of the plane, feeling diminished and unheard? Eleanor settled into her rightful seat, but the victory felt incomplete. The murmurs around her had faded, yet the weight of what had happened lingered. She glanced at Beth, who moved through the aisle with a cautious expression. The quiet confession, this isn't the first time, stuck in Eleanor's mind. How many others had been silently, resentfully pushed aside? She turned toward the window, watching as city lights flickered against the night sky. This wasn't just about one flight or one seat. It was about a pattern, a system that counted on passengers to stay quiet and accept injustice. But Eleanor had never been one to stay silent. As the plane began its descent, a new determination settled within her. She had the power to do something, not just for herself, but for everyone who had faced the same unfair treatment. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She reached for her phone and opened a new message. "We need to talk." The message went to a journalist she knew well. This story needed to be told.